I mean, again, it depends on the context, but just insulting someone's wife, I mean, going straight to violence for that, I would think that's still excessive.
But I think
personally.
that just the threat of it existing whatsoever is always a good thing. Like, I think that just people being worried about that being a possibility consequence of what they're doing is always going to be a good thing. Say, you wouldn't talk to me like that if we were in person, as they're saying. Like,
I don't think this is
would punch you.
necessarily true. Like, that, have you ever been in an argument with your friends and it gets aggressive? And I mean, I don't know. I maybe just say, hey man, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, that's insane that you would do that. Like, obviously we can't live together anymore. I'll put your stuff out on the front doorstep. We're never talking again. Like, I mean, you've just... I don't know if you realise how fucking insane and untenable your position is.
I'm not understanding where you think it's insane. Everything that you brought up, I think these are like how most people would look at it. I think
surely your ability to engage in violence against a woman should act as a disincentive for them to be violent towards you then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the process of holding
That's not what you're
down,
saying.
Like it is what I'm saying. I just said that you. The interactions are edge cases in the first place. Yes, this is what most people would do in these interactions. But then you're taking that and acting like, oh, this is so normal, and I'm actually like, we don't want violence all over the place, and blah blah blah. It's not going to be all over the place because these are already very rare things that happen. Whereas I'm saying interpersonal, immoral scenarios where
I'm not talking. Okay.
One and we would just say, "Oh yeah, well you just have to deal with it and suck it up and walk away." And I don't think that should always be the expectation. I think that there are times where those people who are the ones doing something wrong, they should be the ones bearing the consequences, not the person who's the victim.
Hello.
What up, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. I only woke up like right when you text me, and I was in the middle of filling some stuff out, so I'm still kind of waking up, but how's it going?
Yeah, can't complain. Just talking about some streamer that's boycotting Twitch because they're running ads for Hogwarts Legacy.
Well, that's completely sensible. It's my dad told me a story this morning about how he was listening to Dennis Prager the other day, and they ran an ad that had a cuss word in it, and he called and chewed them out. So that's what you got to do.
Okay, you gonna come up?
Yeah.
Okay. There he is.
Hey yo.
By the way, are you black?
Am I black? No.
Okay. Because sometimes people are like mixed race and like super white.
I'm like, so according to like my stuff, I'm like a large portion Native American, and like you can tell when you look at the rest of my family, but I'm just a freaking normal white loser. Unfortunately.
Wait, so but your heritage is indigenous?
Yeah, Cherokee.
That's wild. You got like loads of like, woke points you can use, surely.
Yeah, I guess. I don't. So the only time I've used them is talking to somebody like Lady Raincloud or Aiko, like people where that actually is relevant. Outside of that, I don't think with normal people that actually matters. So I only use it if I think it's like people using like being white against people instead. So yeah.
Okay, so I didn't watch it. I've not watched any of it. Okay, but I did. Actually, I'm not sure. I watched 30 seconds yesterday, but I was in the middle of something. You responded to my comments, and I think Destiny's comments as well about this no jumper stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's going on? What's your disagreement with my very reasonable take?
Okay, so yeah, this is what I was trying to explain in chat the other day. So, I guess when we're specifically talking about the no jumper stuff, the guy is an idiot. He's freaking out over petty stuff. I'm not like saying that people should do this stuff over something so petty. But y'all's arguments seem to apply to like all talking, like violence should never come from talking, violence should never come from words. So I think in specific scenarios where we're looking at people where there's already like this agreed upon culture that the cops aren't going to get called. You're saying stuff like you're going to ruin your life or something. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, if the cops aren't actually involved. And I think if their reputation is how they make money, this is what like their livelihood depends on. is their reputation, not just like, you know, whether or not people will high five them in the streets, but like whether or not they can actually put food on the table. Yeah, I think a lot of times like it's actually a big enough deal for them to make to end up getting violent or escalating over words.
Okay. Well, the first thing I just want to point out is I understand that in a specific scenario, engaging in violence over like words isn't necessarily going to ruin your life in that one instance. But I'm saying if you adopt the mentality and the habits of moving to violence in response to words, you're setting yourself up for catastrophic life consequences. You know, if you continue and persist with that throughout your life. That's the point that I'm making. Do you disagree with that?
I think, yeah, again, I think it's like a case by case scenario. So yeah, if you're all of a sudden like getting upset over really petty stuff like home phone was, then yeah,
No,
sure.
no, no, no.
Like,
It's not a case by case scenario. It's very simple. If you set out your life on the basis of I'm going to engage in violence to protect my rep if someone insults or offends me with words, you are setting yourself up for severe consequences if that is the fundamental core belief in your life that you persist with. You are setting yourself up for that. It might not come to pass, but the chances are far higher of you having, like, it could be police, it could be violence against you that hurts you seriously, it could be a number of things. But you're putting yourself in a situation where that's a far more likely outcome.
I think that's most people. I think you're talking about most people right now.
No, I'm not talking about most people. I'm talking about if you think, right, if someone disrespects me and I respond with violence, that's the right thing to do. Okay. If you set that as your life goal, as a fundamental belief in your life, you are going to set yourself up for worse outcomes than if you don't do that. I don't think that's like most people. Most people are, generally speaking, are only going to consider using violence, if at all, in situations of like self-defense or something like that. They're not likely to respond to insults, words, etc. with violence.
Yeah, so again, if we're talking about like at the most petty level, yes, I agree. But I think most people, if I'm like walking over and like, you know, calling some dude's wife a whore in a restaurant and like being loud and open, and I'm like following them around, you know, harassing them and bugging the hell out of them. I never touched them. I never did anything. Yeah, I think most of the times they're like the husband's gonna come over and freaking knock me out at some point. I think that is most people.
But that's not just words, is it? That's like harassment. That's different. It
What
depends on
is
exactly the
difference?
context.
Well, my point is that I'm just using words. I'm just using words, and I'm just saying things to them that are going to be super offensive. And I think eventually there is an escalation level with words to where most
But
people
but
would use violence.
but there's a physicality that's being engaged in terms of approaching them and being near them and being in their presence that goes beyond just words, like insults, talking, like on the internet, for example, right? Like, there's a difference between, like, for example, if I called you a fucking idiot and your girlfriend's a fucking bitch here, right? Then I can't imagine you're going to start making threats and telling me you're going to hunt me down and shoot me and shit like that, right? But if it was in real life and I came up to you and said, you know, you're a fucking, your girlfriend's a bitch, you're probably going to tell me to fuck off, right? That's going to be your first response. But then if I persist and continue to exist in your vicinity, and I'm like getting in your face, getting in your girlfriend's face, and I keep saying this stuff, then at some point, I mean, maybe you call the police, and then eventually, if I continue to do that, maybe you might escalate it to violence yourself. But then I've engaged in a physical behavior that goes beyond just the words that I'm using at that point, surely.
I suppose, yeah, sure. I like from what I was getting from what you were saying yesterday, it seemed like your arguments applied to like all verbal things. Like anything verbal, you should never engage in violence over words. And then, but if you're saying this isn't words anymore, that it's now something else, even though it's coming from words, then sure, I agree. That
I guess I was looking at it in the context of like, what is it that Destiny's actually said? Well, Destiny said, if you engage in stuff over like shit talking, it's savagery, or you're a savage or something along those lines, right? Which, I appreciate some people might interpret in certain ways, but I think it's a fairly reasonable take, because savage simply means to be uncivilized.
Yeah, of course.
And right. But beyond that, it was like he said, I don't know why you'd act like this. Your mum's dead. She doesn't care. That was the statement that he made.
Yeah, again, it was super petty.
Right. So in that context, there's absolutely no reason or need to move to like a violent act off of those words specifically, right?
Yeah, in his case, yes, I am not defending what Home Phone did in any way, but it seemed like your arguments and Destiny's arguments, what I was listening to, and each time you guys made them, I would repeat them on stream and say, like, this applies to, like, all verbal fights or all verbal confrontations where all of a sudden I'm not able to actually escalate things to a violent manner because it's verbal now. And so that was my issue, is that the arguments applied to pretty much all verbal things where you should never actually get into a fight. But you're saying now just being in the vicinity of somebody else actually changes whether or not it's just verbal now. So,
well, it's not just being in the vicinity, because, you know, but first of all, I think even in, like, say, American law, this is codified in some way, because you've got something called fighting words, right? Like that is something that isn't protected by the First Amendment, I don't think.
I don't think that's true.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that there's this concept called fighting words, which is
a concept,
the idea.
yes. Yeah.
Is this not something to do with the First Amendment? Have I got it wrong? I could be wrong.
Let's see. It says fighting words are words meant to incite violence, such as something to incite violence. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fighting words doctrine is a United States constitutional law. You're supposed to be the American here. You're supposed to know this better than me. What the fuck?
Well, I would think that, like, if I come over and talk about your mom, those are fighting words, but I think that that's still protected, and that you can't, like, generally come over and punch me just because I talk about your mom.
Well, yeah, obviously,
but those are fighting
it's not
words
going
as well. That's something that could incite violence.
No,
right?
hang on a minute. No, you're being a fucking moron here, because obviously, in doctrine of the law, a word is going to mean something different than a colloquial definition between you and I, right?
Okay,
you might come to me and say, you fucking suck at Apex Legends, and you're never going to get into fucking Masters. And I could see that as offensive and fighting words, but the law's going to look at that and go, yeah, you're being totally fucking unreasonable.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that, like,
right.
yeah, the way that we would use it colloquially is obviously going to, I guess, different than whatever this is. So, yeah.
Sure. So, you know, I think that's the point, is, like, you know, I would accept that perhaps, you know, to say that you should never escalate to violence off the back of words, or, you know, it's stupid to do that or something like that. Like, it may come across as hyperbolic. But I think certainly there's cases where physicality can change the context of words that you're using, right? Like if I said, I'm going to shoot you, right? You're probably not going to think anything of that. And especially if I said it on the internet, you're probably not going to think as the same as if I was in your face with a gun saying, I'm going to fucking shoot you, right? That's going to be contextually very different. So it's all going to depend on the context of it. I don't think or can conceive of any circumstance where words spoken online on the internet would constitute a violent response, because you would have to have a physicality off the back of those words that would then justify the violence. So if I said to you now, you know, something like that, and then I think even legally, I don't know if, like, what the person said as like a threat to Destiny, I don't know if that would be dealt with legally anyway, because that isn't, like, you know, serious enough or warranted to do that.
Yeah.
But there would need to be a physicality there. So the same token, if I'm insulting you, just insults on their own are not enough. It needs to be a level of physicality.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess maybe the arguments yesterday didn't have this much detail or nuance in them. So that's what I was arguing about in the chat, and that's what I was going off about on stream. And it was the same with Destiny as well, where yeah, I felt like all of his arguments were just like because what you're talking about is still words in the end, but it's like there are other things involved, and I think most of the time what's actually going to cause the violence is normally like some sort of emotional response, right? Like the person's trolling you hard enough to get you pissed off in real life to where you're actually going to do something. And normally, so like in the example of like a restaurant where you're calling the dude's wife a bitch, right? It's not just that you're there in person with them, but like most of what's actually causing the violence is you being if I'm over here yelling at you and your wife, it's the fact that I'm the one who's acting like out of hand. It's the fact that I'm the one who's being crazy, and I think most people would watch you walk over and punch me in the face and think like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like that's kind of what you get if that's how you act. And I think that lots of times we already have this like assumed level of violence from acting or talking to people in a certain way that keeps us all in check in person.
So do you agree with Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars then?
No.
But why not? Because he was like, you know, shitting on his wife.
Because I think that's part of like what you agree to when you're like a public figure like that. Like you and me sitting on stream with people in chat, like saying stupid stuff about us, or us getting on stream and like, you know, arguing and going hard and screaming and yelling.
But that's not on stream. That's in person. That's an in-person event, isn't it?
Right. No, my point is that they sign up for this like level of scrutiny. Like they sign up for this. He's making jokes. He's a comedian. Like there's a bunch of levels of like what makes this very different than somebody actually trying to insult you and somebody actually trying to like get you heated and actually like trying to troll you in some way.
Okay. But it sounded like what you were saying is that the very fact that the person was there insulting the wife, that was fundamentally an issue, which would, you know, contextually not justify, but maybe make it more understandable as to why someone might engage in violence.
No, my example is somebody in a restaurant doing this, right? Somebody in a restaurant doing this where they're on the other side of the restaurant. There's no like level of like, you know, you have any fear of me coming over and doing something, but it's more so that I'm the one who's acting uncivilized. I'm the one who's causing a problem. And I think most people aren't comfortable with people acting that way. And most people aren't comfortable with somebody going off like that and trying to like incite something in you and trying to troll you in that way to get you heated in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I feel like still in that situation, going up and punching them would be unreasonable. And I think that using the functions of society that are available, such as the management of the restaurant to kick you out, further to that, maybe calling the police or contacting the police if there was like harassment happening and they wouldn't leave and stuff like that. I think those types of things like would be your first points of call. And then if those things failed for whatever reason and the person refused to like leave you alone and kept pestering you, eventually it might be appropriate to like, you know, move to some form of physical violence. But there's a couple of steps along the way before I think you can justify just going up and fucking smacking them around the head.
Maybe, yeah. Like again, I think most of the time it's going to be context dependent, but I think that in lots of cases when somebody is just like standing there, like calling your wife a whore, calling your wife a bitch, like, you know, saying she slept around or something like that, I think that most guys aren't going to be like, you know what, I'm going to go find management. You're going to be in a lot of trouble here, mister. Like, I think that they're just going to get up and go punch the guy. And I think most people expect that because they expect some level of of being like civilized with one another to where, yeah, like we almost always have these like agreed upon rules that like somebody's going to escalate this to violence if you act in this way. And so we all treat each other in a certain manner.
I mean, I don't know how we track this, but I'm fairly confident that most people would just, if someone was hassling them in a restaurant and being rude to their wife, the first point of call would be, okay, this guy's being fucking weird. I'm going to get management to get this guy out of here. Right? I don't think the first point of call would be to go up and fucking punch him around the face.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I don't think that there's a way to measure this. I'm surprised that you're disagreeing, but I think most people would, yeah, I think most people would just get up and go fight the guy. Like, I think that most people would go in more, normally I think that they would try to like get him out and get him to leave. And if he's not leaving, your idea is, okay, well, I'm going to physically make him leave. And if I go put my hands on him, he's already going to fight back against me. Otherwise he would have left already. So now it's already coming to physicality one way or the other.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, there's no way to demonstrate this or anything. But putting that to one side, I think even if you might understand someone getting angry, you know, and taking a certain action, I mean, again, it depends on the context. But just insulting someone's wife, I mean, going straight to violence for that, I would think that's still excessive, personally.
I think that, so again, this is my frame of reference and this is how like I grew up. I feel like everybody always understands that there is that like line there, and that if that line is crossed, somebody is likely to punch them. There's likely to be some level of violence. And I think that that is like a necessary like thing for an ordered society, for people to act in a certain way. Like if you don't care, so normally the reason that we act like in a moral way is because of some sort of stigma, right? Like we want people to think we're a good person or something like that. We want people to be willing to be friends with us. We want people to be willing to interact with us. But already, if I'm coming over and attacking you in this way, obviously I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care if we're friends or not. And I don't care if you think I'm immoral if I'm already acting this way. And so normally, yeah, I think that there has to be some other level of like, you know, something else besides just stigma. And I think most of the time, again, this is the way I grew up, most of the time people aren't going to call the cops over somebody like, you know, getting into a quick fight. Like, as long as nobody's seriously injured. I think I've seen people get in fights in restaurants. I've been in more fights than I could probably count. I've seen a million fights in my life. I think that that's just kind of generally like, yeah, there's normally this other level of accountability that we have between person to person without the state, because the state is already in and of itself like that's some level of violence in the first place. It's already some threat of violence. And I think from person to person, we have a threat of violence between one another as well.
I mean, I would argue that like we're constantly trying to set things up and put things in place to move away from this idea that we have the threat of violence against one another to keep each other essentially honest and civilized, right? Because a long time ago, this was a lot more realistic that like if someone, you know, insulted you, there was like duels and things like this, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how much of this is like just media culture and stuff, but I'm fairly certain that like hundreds of years ago, um, that you would engage in physical violence with one another far more readily if there was some sort of like insult or hurt feelings or something like that. And it seems like we've recognized that there's an inherent danger and risk in engaging in that type of behavior. So we're trying to move away from it so that we can use the court, we can use police, and we can use positions of authority or figures of authority to, you know, resolve and deal with, you know, issues between one another.
I
Right?
think that okay, so one, yes, we are obviously moving away from it, and I think that like these sorts of things are becoming less and less necessary over time because yeah, we're recognizing things better, stigmatizing things better. You know, social media stigmatizes things to a whole other level on top of that. Like there's a lot of other things there. And but I do think that like there I think that it still is necessary. So I think that I would rather somebody just not want to come troll me in the first place and not want to go like be acting that way in the first place rather than like, you know, they come bug me and they get kicked out of a restaurant and that's kind of the end of it, right? Or they ruin everybody else's night and cause a big problem and that there's nothing but they just kind of get kicked out and then they go back home. Like, I think that normally most people have this in the back of their head, that there's actually more consequences to treating people in that way. And I think that's a good thing. But I think that the level of threat
but the other side of your mouth,
rarely
it seems
come
like you're
into
trying to
play.
justify. It seems like you're trying to justify or act like being against that is like somehow wrong or stupid.
I'm saying that I think it's necessary. I think it's a good thing to exist. Yeah.
Okay. But so, okay, but then I don't really understand your position then, because you're saying it's good that we're moving away from it, but then you're saying it's also necessary and good that it exists.
I'm saying we're moving away from violence being necessary and that it's becoming less and less necessary. Like we have other things that we've put into place and that we've learned that like there's other ways to deal with this. But in these cases, I think that there still eventually gets to a level where yes, like the example of somebody just coming and trolling you and your wife in a restaurant. I think that this is
because the other problem I've got as
those
well
other
is
levels didn't work.
the other issue that I think we're kind of not really getting to either is, as much as there's maybe a couple of issues you could point to in the legal system, it at least presents some precise mechanism, as precise as we can, to dish out punishment and justice accordingly based on our agreed idea of what that should look like, right? The problem with like getting into a fight with someone over words is you could engage in an action which might seem reasonable, like punching someone in the head, but then they could fall over, they could hit the head in a certain way, they could be seriously injured. The other person might pull out a weapon and shoot you. Like, it's like you're just escalating the situation. And I think that in situations like that, your best bet is to often to de-escalate. And I think that by engaging in violence, that is an immediate escalation, which is just going to lead to worse outcomes. Whereas if you have someone insulting you and talking shit to you, as much as you might understand someone getting a bit red-blooded and starting throwing hands, and I think, again, if it's an extreme and it constitutes harassment, perhaps in that case there's an argument for self-defense you could make. I think that at the kind of lower echelons of this, it just seems like you're escalating a situation to violence that's just going to cause more problems than it's worth in the moment, like at that time, right? Like particularly, you could get arrested, right? You could get in trouble for that. You know, potentially, you might get charged with some sort of assault.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the level I there's a possibility that when we're talking about like words like harassment, that's like it's just going to come down to like we probably agree on what harassment is, and that's just not coming into my head as like what a way to characterize this. Because I think in some level, yes, of course, if some dude's like standing on the other side of a restaurant, he just walks in the door, you guys are sitting at your table, and he just walks in the door and he's just standing on the other side of the restaurant, screaming and yelling, talking about your wife, talking crap about you, you know, sharing personal information about you guys, like saying all sorts of stuff in front of a big restaurant full of people. I guess to some level, I think a lot of people would call that harassment. And I think that, yeah, of course, like I think in that case, I think that it is probably somebody is going to go over and try to get this guy out of the restaurant. And whether it's the guy
Wait. There's you could if security, who are a position of authority that have been appointed at that moment to deal with the security and safety of the restaurant, if they take them physically and remove them from the situation, you know, security often have some level of training, so they're able to engage in physical force in a way that's safer, right? That's very different to an untrained person who is angry as well. He's very angry at the situation, is emotionally invested, right? Walking up and being like, right, I'm getting you out of here, and trying to engage with them in some sort of hold that maybe isn't safe. Maybe they fall over, they start throwing punches at them. Again, it's unlikely security are going to start throwing punches either. They're going to engage in a physical restraint that they're trained in, that has got some level of safety beyond just being physically violent with them.
Yeah, and that's probably better, but at the same time, I think that there's got like I think if the person who's being insulted wants there to be some level of consequence for this person so that something like that doesn't happen in the future, I think that that's probably a good thing to exist. And again, these things are very rarely going to happen because we've built other mechanisms within society. But I think that just the threat of it existing whatsoever is always a good thing. Like I think that just people being worried about that being a possibility consequence of what they're doing is always going to be a good thing.
So you're saying just the idea of the threat that they could get punched by the person they're insulting is good because it means they might not do it. Is that?
Yes. I think the threat is what's necessary, and us saying that like this should never be a thing is probably a problem where like people are able, like the way that we talk to each other on the sun is shining right in my freaking eyes. It's driving me nuts. But the way that we talk to each other on the internet, it's obviously not the way that people talk to each other in real life. And that's why we talk to each other this way, is because we're on the internet, because we're not in person. If people say this all the time and it comes off really cringe, but I think it's true. Like, people say all the time, if you were in person with me, you wouldn't talk to me like that. And it's probably true. Like 90% of the time, like, yeah, if these people were in person, that person, like whoever it is that's talking crap and going off, they probably would never talk in that way.
But this is but okay. But the thing is like that's because we have a physicality with one another generally has a de-escalating impact and influence on how we interact, right?
Why?
Like, well, because you know we don't want to. I mean, I don't know. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because there's a level, I think there's a threat there. I think that there's a threat or a likelihood of violence that comes from talking to people in that way. And that's why people say, you wouldn't talk to me like that if we were in person, is they're saying, like,
I don't think this is necessarily true. Like, have you ever been in an argument with your friends and it gets aggressive and you start shouting at each other and getting really angry with each other?
Yes, but I've also been in fistfights with my friends.
Okay. What's the context for that? When have you been in fistfights with your friends?
One of my buddies, my girlfriend called me one day and said he tried to kiss me, and he was living with me at the time. He wanted me to come pick him up from work, so I went to his work. He came out in the parking lot. I sucker punched him, and I told him he's kicked out of my house now, and I'm gonna bring him all of his stuff, and left him in the parking lot.
How'd you feel about doing that?
I felt good. And he's still my best friend to this day. Like, this is one of the things that we went over on stream the other day in stats. Like, guys are more likely to have been in fistfights with their best friends. Like, it's a fairly common thing, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, that's just fucking insane to me. That's like insane, savage behavior that I just don't think is the right way to deal with anything in your life. Do you still think it was good that you did that now?
Yeah, I think that there's not another consequence to like tell him, hey, you shouldn't do this sort of thing. There is no other mechanism within society to stop him from doing this
What about
outside of I'm just not
communication and
his friend
argument and
anymore.
discussion?
I think that he already knew ahead of time that that was wrong. I don't need to explain it to him. He already knew that, and he did it anyways, right?
Okay, I just think.
What am I going to tell him? What am I supposed to say to him in that moment that's going to make a bigger difference than, or not even a bigger difference? It doesn't even have to have that level of effect. But what am I going to say to him in this moment that would actually change anything?
I mean, I don't know. Like you said, I'm assuming you're concerned about TOS. Is that what you said? Kiss.
No, yeah, like he actually like I think we were like 21 at the time or something. But no, like she said that he tried to kiss her, she pushed him off, and then he said like, "Can I kiss you?" They were in a hotel.
Oh, I misunderstood. Right. Okay. Yeah. So basically, he tried to assault her, sexually assault her, and you were right.
I suppose I wouldn't characterize it that way. He was hitting on my girlfriend. He was trying to get my girlfriend to cheat on me with him. And
Wait, hang on. That makes it worse. I thought maybe you were saying that he tried to force himself upon her, but you're saying he tried to crack on with her, and she said no, thank you. He didn't take it further. So your response to that was to go and physically assault him.
Yeah, that was my girlfriend. Yeah.
What? Because he tried to crack on with her. He tried to flirt with her and kiss her.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think I would do. I was younger then. I think I'd probably act the same way today. Yeah.
What? I mean, I don't know. I maybe just say, hey, man, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, that's insane that you would do that. Like, obviously, we can't live together anymore. I've put your stuff out on the front doorstep. We're never talking again. Like, would that not be a way, as you seem to have done anyway, to deal with that?
Well, I didn't seem to do that anyways. Like I said, this is my best friend. Like I'm still bros before hoes, bro. Like I'm much more likely. I knew that we would still be friends after this. Like I wasn't like that worried about that. I knew that he knew we would still be friends after it. It was more so just like, you know, you're being a dick. There's got to be some sort of consequence for this. There's got to be like, you can't just run around trying to kiss your friends' girlfriends or like get with your friends' girlfriends. Like that's not an okay thing. And so, yeah, I think that it's better that
bit of street justice. A bit of street justice. Is that what we're saying?
Some sort of mechanism to stop people, to de-incentivize them from doing messed up things in the future. Yeah.
I mean, what do you say to that? Like, I think that's crazy. We just got a real fundamental. I do not think that engaging in physical violence because a friend, cracked onto your girlfriend is an appropriate response or the right way to move forward. And I think that if you set your life up like that, you are putting yourself in a position where you could reach legal consequence or some other consequence of engaging in that sort of behavior.
You could, but again, I think that's by far most people. I think that's most people. I think we're talking about like 90% of people right now. I think we're talking about 90% of men, and I think that we're like selecting for.
But you think that? Wait! You're saying it's most people, but you also think it's a good thing. You think it should continue, don't you?
I'm saying that unless there's some sort of other mechanism, right? Over time, we've created other mechanisms that have de-incentivized these things without violence. And so I think that those things are good. But right now, I don't see that other thing. I don't see another way that I think is better for us to deal with these things. And so I think that, yeah, like there has to be some
so you
sort of
don't think that communication,
factors.
talking, explaining, like mediating, things like that, you don't think that's potentially a tool to deal with this? You think it has to be violence?
No, I
even
think
today.
I think that is potentially a tool to deal with this. And in certain situations, certain things, yes, I think most of the time talking is going to be the best thing to resort to. I think most of the time using the other mechanisms that are in place is normally the best thing to go with. But in the scenarios that I'm pointing out, those other mechanisms already existed. They're not doing anything. These things are happening anyways. And I think that all of us just saying, oh, well, let's just let it go. Let's just leave it. I think that we lead to a worse society in that case.
But wait, hang on. That's dishonest. I'm not saying let it go and leave it. I'm saying you deal with it, but I'm saying you just don't necessarily have to deal with it with physical violence. Like if someone's your friend and they fuck you over, you can make it clear with words that you don't want to associate with them anymore, and you can cut off ties with them. And that is a sufficient way to deal with it. I just don't understand the need to go and sucker punch them.
You could do those things, but okay, so let's say this is somebody that you like, you've been through a lot with, you fought in the freaking military with this guy side by side. You know that you're just going to be friends. Like, you know that you're not gonna just stop being friends with one another. Okay. This person obviously already knows that it's wrong to do this. They obviously, it's not like nobody told them, hey, you don't go try to get your buddy's girlfriend to cheat on them with you. Like, there's already the stigma there. There's already all of the other things. I don't understand, like, what is the other option that actually de-incentivizes this thing? What is the level past what we've already done that actually de-incentivizes this sort of action?
If someone values a friendship with you, right, and they breach that trust, well, then they've breached the friendship, and then the friendship ends, so you lose something valuable. That's the disincentive, surely.
I agree that that's an option, but I'm trying to take that factor out of it and saying, like, I think that there's a level of bond that goes above, like, girlfriends and things like that. And I think that there's a level of, like, going through things that with people that actually...
Well, if that's the case, if they do something with your girlfriend and your friendship goes beyond that, then it doesn't matter, does it? And you can just move past it because, you know, it bros before hoes, like you say. Like,
well, no, I still want to be friends with him, but I want to de-incentivize the action. And if it doesn't de-incentivize the action,
if you wrong
then
me,
there'll always
I'll
be
sucker
consequences
punch you.
for it.
That's the disincentive. If you wrong me, I'll sucker punch you.
Yes, and I think that's most people. Yes, I think that is by far most people.
That's fucking bullshit. I don't think that's most people at all.
I think it's by far most people. I think we're selecting for, like, people who sit at their computer most days, who played video games growing up, who aren't people who were, like, very physical and working out and playing football and playing sports and, like, doing those sorts of things. I think that's most people. And I think most people grew up being physical and grew up getting into fights with their friends and grew up doing
Yeah, when they were children, they did that. Yeah, when they were children, they did that. And then they grew up and realized, oh, shit. Fighting to resolve our issues probably isn't the best way to do it. Maybe we should find another way, such as communicating with one another.
Well, when they were children, they got into it over petty issues, and it was smaller things. But I think as adults, we still find areas where it's not all that petty, and it still eventually is necessary. Like, I think I would rather live in a society where somebody gets punched once in a blue moon rather than a society where people can just get away with all of the things where there's no other mechanism there to de-incentivize it. I think that, yeah, that
but
is
you keep saying there's no other you keep saying there's no other mechanism, right? That might be true if someone's like a sociopath and hasn't got any feelings or emotions. But if you are friends with someone, right, and you wrong them in some way, that's going to hurt you as well, and it's going to feel bad when the consequences of that, such as the friendship ending or having like a terse disagreement or issue or fight words with someone, not physical, you know, that stuff's gonna hurt, right? Unless you've like some sort of mental case that can't feel these things. So the disincentive comes from feeling a bad way about something happening as well, surely.
Yeah, sure. That
like
is...
okay, before the punch, the fact that, forget about the fact you punched this guy. Do you think the fact that you tried to crack on with your girlfriend and then you were angry about it, do you think that had like a negative impact on him?
I don't know, because I think that he already knew that that was going to be the case. I think he knew that before it ever happened.
But you can know something's wrong, and then when you do the act, right? Maybe if before it's discovered, you kind of like don't think about it, but then when it's discovered and you're confronted, you feel like shit about it.
Yeah, maybe.
So do you think he might have felt that way about it?
Maybe.
Can you conceive of another way you could have dealt with that situation that didn't involve sucker punching him to get the same outcome?
To get the same outcome? No, not a better way, but I could conceive of other ways, yeah.
Okay. So you think that punching him was the optimum way to deal with that, to get the outcome
and again,
you
I
wanted?
think that is, yeah, I think that, even when I pulled my chat yesterday saying, like, how many of you think that, like, if Destiny said this thing about somebody's mom, even though we all agree, he didn't actually say the thing about the mom, right? He said, like, you know, your mom's dead. I didn't understand that. So your mom's dead, she doesn't care, right? That's what he said. He wasn't talking crap about the mom. He was like talking crap about house phone. But I think most people understand that that's so insensitive. That's such an insensitive thing to say about somebody's mom while they're grieving, that I think most people would punch him. And so I polled my chat, and I think it was, I think it was 80% said yes, like anybody would get punched in that scenario. And I think that that's low because, again, we're selecting for like people who spend their time on computers a lot of the time. So I think that's already a very low percentage.
Okay. I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, to be fair, like some parts of LA, there were certain people that like hassled me, like that guy that drove by in the car and was giving me shit. But that was like quite unexpected. Like that is it's highly unlikely something like that would happen over here in the UK. Um,
I think most of the time, like, just again, I think most of the time it's just the threat of it existing. So if somebody starts talking crap to me, normally all I have to do is just look at them and walk towards them, and that's the end of it. They're gonna run off. The situation's over. Like, because it's just the level of threat normally in and of itself, which is why people end up coming nose to nose and like getting in each other's faces, is because they're both saying your level of threat does not bother me, and so like you're either going to have to do something or this is just going to continue, and that's normally, yeah.
yeah. I mean, you understand that polling your chat is not like I could poll my chat now and it would probably give a very different result, right? Like
Yeah,
that doesn't really mean anything.
yeah.
Your
I'm going
audience
to the
is going to
only
tend to
evidence I
agree
could
with you.
think of. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I say, I think that. I mean, I don't know, man. I just think that if some of these examples you're describing would be dealt with management and security, not with like going to physical violence and going and punching the person. It would have to be pretty extreme, I think, in order for it to escalate to physical violence.
Well, I think I'm
Um,
talking about the extreme scenarios. Like, I think I'm talking about the areas where people are acting so out of pocket and so irregular to where we're already in that scenario. And I think that, like, yeah, calling security, these are good things. Having, like, the professionals deal with it, normally that's a good thing. But I also think at some level, there needs to be a level of threat to where this is a likely thing to happen or a possible thing to happen to where people don't do it. And so otherwise there's just no de-incentivization. Like, I can go, I can run in the restaurant, I can say whatever I want. They're going to kick me out. I'm going to go home and laugh about it later. And it's going to be a good, I'm going to write about it in my journal and laugh about it again.
yeah, sure. I don't know. I mean, it seems like we just have got very different views about how to handle this stuff. I mean, I don't really buy this. Oh, they're just online people and stuff like that. Like these people, yes, of course, they spend time online, but at least some of them spend time out there in the real world, right? Like I don't think
Yeah,
they're just
of course.
and I think I would argue the vast majority of people that are watching right now, if they were out and about and someone came up to them and said, "Oh, your wife's a fat bitch," I mean, just to confirm, if someone came up to you and said, "Your wife is a fat bitch," do you think that a physical response to that would be justified, or what do you think about that?
Again, I think just the threat of the physical violence in the first place is enough to get rid of the person. But I think, yeah, like normally just walking towards them is going to get rid of them. But if that's not the case and they're going to stand there and continue doing it, then yeah, I think at some point there has to be some level of accountability there outside of like, I'm going to, if we're on the streets and the sidewalk, there's not like security to call that. And I don't
Okay,
think
no, no,
that.
wait. No, no. I'll just answer it, right? So you're in the street, okay?
Mhm.
Someone says, your girlfriend's a fat bitch and stands there. You walk up to them as like a show of physical threat or violence, and they just stand there, right? Can you punch them?
I probably not. I would say normally
Okay.
I would keep walking if that's all they've said. Normally, but yeah, if they
Okay.
continue saying it, and yeah, then I think, yeah, at some point the idea is that you want them to stop and you want to de-incentivize them from doing this in the future. Somebody just saying that once and then continuing on about their day, I don't think most people would even think about it again. But I think, yeah, if they're gonna like keep yelling it, they're allowed to walk on the sidewalk too. They're allowed to, stand there yelling stuff and being loud and obnoxious. People walk around with freaking boom boxes and, loud music all the time. Like, you're allowed to be loud and obnoxious all you want, but once you're actually like engaging with another person and bugging them, I think that now, yeah, you're trying to get an emotional response out of them. You're trying to ruin their day. You're trying to bring them down. And I think that there should probably be, yeah, some level of threat there.
I mean, to me, the threat would be like, if someone continued, it would be, listen, if you don't fuck off, I'm going to call the police, right? Like that.
Yeah,
That's
of
the thing
course.
that you would use.
I
But
I
you're saying, yeah, of course. But then you're also saying it would be okay to go and physically assault them if they continue to fuck with you.
Okay, sorry. If all they're doing is standing there and talking to me, no, I don't think that there's like, I don't think I don't know what I would call the police for. Like, they're bugging me. Like, police are just going to come, they're going to tell them to screw off, and then they're going to screw off.
And then the
they're
problem
gonna
is
walk away.
solved, right? Without resorting to physical violence.
No, I think if they've already gotten to that level where they are willing to, like, not just say one thing, but continue bugging you at some point, I think that there should be, I think that there should be levels of consequences for these things. I understand.
But again, I go back to the consequences. I'm going to call the police. The police come along and say, what's going on here? And you go, this person keeps following me and hassling me and insulting me. And the police say, right, you know, go about your business off on your way, whatever. I mean,
that's the consequence. That I don't think that's a consequence. I think them just saying, "Hey, you won, now leave." Like, I don't think that's a consequence. I think that that's the opposite of a consequence. I don't think calling the cops actually does anything. I wanted to ask you, when we're talking about the audiences, do you think so? When we're talking about like we've been talking about a lot of red pill stuff and incel stuff lately. And a lot of the issues, like we talk about, like, come from like communication issues with men. They get online earlier in life. They get, you know, they start playing video games earlier in life. And this gives them, like, I would say social issues where they don't learn to be social early on, like everybody else, or like the ways that we would hope people do in society. Do you not think that we have audiences that are, like, a lot more likely to be in those areas?
What, people that spend like more time online playing video games and stuff?
Not people who spend more time on it. That they are the people that we're talking about that earlier in life were kind of antisocial and who were on computers.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think resorting to violence over someone insulting you in the street, I would consider that to be antisocial personally. But that's just me. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's just where I've grown up, or like my experiences in life, but this for me has been the norm. It's been what most people expect. There's always videos online of somebody like yapping and talking crap. The guy punches him. All of the comments are like, yeah, that's kind of like what you expect if that's what you're going to do. Like, and I think that, like, yeah,
but hang on a second. Wait.
The comments
online are saying that.
Like Facebook,
doesn't
like
that
Instagram, like Twitter, like places where literally everybody is, not like, you know, Twitch and YouTube live stream comments. I think that those
I'd say that, like, more people like watch YouTube, right? I think, you know, you see a lot of comments on YouTube. Yeah. And if there's a fight and someone gets punched, I mean, I'd wager if you went and looked at some of the interactions on the Adam against Adam. And also there was another time when a guy called another guy a bitch and he got angry and punched him. I'm fairly certain if you went and looked at the YouTube comments there, like, everyone's going to be going like, yeah, good on him. He got what he deserved and all this shit, right? And YouTube comments are kind of normies as well.
Well, if you go look at the no jumper comments, they're all people taking home phone's side, and they're all people who are saying, like, yeah, he's the one who assaulted Adam. He's the one who threw the drink at him, and they're all taking home phone's side and not Adam's side. So yeah, I think that, like, YouTube.
So what you're saying, Twitch chat is just full of pussies, basically, terminally online pussies.
I am not phrasing it that way. I'm saying these are people where we're selecting for different groups and we're talking about different kinds of people. And I think that if we poll them and say, hey, how many of you played sports when you were younger? How many of you were, like, in, like, active physical engagements with other people where there was, like, this camaraderie and, like, you were, like, actively, like, yeah, being physical with one another? I think that that is the norm. And I think that's what people are used to. And I think people who grow up that way are probably more likely to get into fights and to, like, think the way that I'm thinking.
Well, no, I think most people, by the time they reach adulthood, look back and go, God, I was a bit of a scrapper when I was at school. And they often get in some sort of trouble with the school for it. And it leads to some consequence that makes them learn, I can't go on in my life, like, with this sort of mentality and behavior. I need to find another way to progress.
I'm saying that just the act of, like, playing football, playing basketball, these are, like, the physical interactions, that they are used to physical interactions, that these are a norm for them, and that there's
a difference between physical interaction in sport and, like, a fight.
There is. Okay, listen. We're talking about one group of people grew up not doing these things and being on the computer instead, and the other group of people grew up with a norm of, like, being physical with one another, being in these sorts of interactions. I'm saying that the group of people that I'm talking about, I believe that's the group of people who are more likely to agree with me. And I think the group of people that you're talking about are more likely to agree with you. And I think that this is like a very different level of ways of that people are being raised in like different life experiences. Yeah.
But I think whichever route you take, whether you spend a lot of time online in your youth or whether you play sport and engage in more physical altercations, I think you eventually end up at the same position, which is the civilized position, which as a society we've agreed is correct, that we need to do our best to find mechanisms beyond physical altercations to deal with disagreements and issues that we have between one another.
I agree with that, but you and I disagree on the level of where those mechanisms actually are efficient. Like and I that's why I think that most people would agree with me, is because we don't see these things happening very often in public, and I think we don't see them happening because
obviously going and punching someone in the face that calls your wife a fat whore, I mean, I wouldn't say that is inefficient. That's pretty efficient, right? In terms of like stopping that there in the moment. But I'm talking about the broader implications and issues that come with engaging in that sort of behavior, right?
So when you're saying that, okay, so it makes it sound like you're saying, hey, now you're more likely to get in fights over other random petty things that don't matter as much. Whereas I'm saying those things are still bad, but it's the areas where we're going to look at it on a case-by-case basis and say, yeah, this is an area where it's probably not all that bad. It was probably necessary in this scenario.
Well, then I don't understand how you can take issue. Like, I don't understand why you don't support Will Smith slapping Chris Rock then, because it, made it clear and disincentivized that behavior going forward, right? But like,
I don't think that you should disincentivize that behavior. I don't think Chris Rock did anything wrong. I think that that's what Will Smith signs up for. I think that that's like that is part of the whole thing when you go and you participate in those activities. It's like Professor Flowers going and debating Vosh and being all snarky and being a dick the entire time, and then running off afterwards and complaining and crying like she's some sort of victim. She signed up for it. She wanted that, and then she played the victim afterwards, right? Like, you engaged in what you knew was you knew what the consequences were. You knew what it is, like what the audience's reaction was going to be. You knew all of these things ahead of time. I think it's the same with comedy. You go to a comedy show, you know the comedian's likely going to pick on the crowd. They're likely going to, find some fat dude and making fun of him or something like that. Like, that is part of what you're signing up for in these scenarios. But I don't think that's part of what you're signing up for when you go to a restaurant or go out in public.
Okay, the Professor Flowers thing, I mean, I feel that's a bit of a red herring. I don't really know what that's got to do with engaging in physical violence.
We're talking about going into scenarios in the public where you know what it is that you're getting into. So Chris Rock being the comedian.
Will Smith maybe was expecting to get roasted a bit for some things, but maybe he just felt that Chris Rock insulting his wife was crossing a line, and he's crossing a line that maybe you don't see, but he sees it as being insulted by it. Who are you to say what someone ought to or ought not be insulted by?
I'm not saying that he ought not be insulted by it.
But you should just take it.
Yes, I'm saying he's signing up to be insulted. Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I just think we've got a very different opinion on this. I don't think that engaging in physical violence for the things you're saying is certainly not for like a friend cracking on to your girlfriend is I think it's stupid. I think that you are going to create situations where there's going to be escalations that are potentially going to be worse and more dangerous and more harmful. You seem to think that it acts as a good disincentive. I don't know. Is there anything else to discuss?
Let me give you like a way that I would separate this again. Okay. So if you and me are talking on here and you start calling me a bitch and like all sorts of stuff, right? That would mean nothing to me because like this is what we sign up for when we come into these conversations. If one of my random Facebook friends starts messaging me and like saying random stuff to me, or like they're like posting all this crap about me on their Facebook and talking a bunch of crap, I think that there would be a very different scenario when you and me meet in real life. We're still good. We're still friends, like, because that's what we're signing up for when we come do this. But him, that's not what I'm signing up for. It's a very different scenario. I did not sign up for this guy to talk about me like that. And I don't think it's okay for him to just ramble on like that. And so my altercation with him is going to be very different than my interaction with you. Does that make sense? Like how I'm separating the two?
Sure, but then I guess that the issue I've got then. So in terms of the no jumper stuff, what you would think that's all wrong. Any threat of violence or conversation about violence is wrong because they're signing up for the public conversation too, right?
I think that home phones being a baby across the board. Yeah, I think almost everything for him is
Okay.
messed up. I do think to some degree we're not like, I think it's necessary to actually talk about the fact that their reputations are what they live on, that like in the black community people will stop watching you over very different things than they will in like a Twitch community where we sit around talking about trans people and gender all the time. I think that like it's important to at least recognize that aspect, but I don't think it actually like changes the outcome. I still think I still think he's signing up for it.
So everything in the discourse that we've looked at, you were saying that the no jumper people were overreacting to the threats of violence because they've signed up for it, are out of order and out of line.
Yes. Again, my issue was with the arguments that were being made
well, it's
from you and
okay,
Destiny,
sure. But it sounds like it's okay. Well, it sounds like what you're saying then, okay, is that was wrong, which I've said is wrong. Obviously, Destiny, I'm sure you can speak to Destiny separately if you want to talk to him about his takes. I was saying that, I thought that was wrong, right? But then what you're saying is, well, if someone engages in other behavior, right, then there may be a time where physical violence is justified. And I'm like, yeah, sure, perhaps in certain circumstances. But then you're presenting examples like, my friend tried to get my girlfriend to cheat on me with him, and so I went and sucker punched him.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And like that's like quite an extreme example that I don't think really fits within a reasonable like response of violence to words.
Yeah, sure. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we eventually disagree on where those lines are drawn. My issue with you and Destiny was the arguments that you guys were making and how broad they were. But obviously, we're getting into the differences there, and we still end up disagreeing on how broad it ought to be and how broad it shouldn't be. So yeah, we're still ending up at that point either way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
I wish there was a way to no, because it's not. I don't even think that it would make a difference to you. I think that if like we polled everybody and like 90% of people were like, yeah, I think that's when you go punch somebody. I would assume, yeah, you've already got like, you already think that like there's an ethical system here that works within our society, and you think that it like fits.
Well, I guess that like, even if like normies were to say, oh, I can understand why that happened, I still don't think that justifies the action. Like, you can reach into history for plenty of examples where normies would have thought stuff was justified. But, through further ethical and moral analysis, we realize actually, no, that wasn't actually any good. Right. And I think this is just an example of that, where, we ought to move towards a situation where there's at least, kind of like, unplanned, unprepared, untrained, like physical violence between one another because of the negative outcomes that come off the back of it, be it in the moment or be it living your life in that way and the consequences that can bring. Like I think if we're looking at these communities where it's about the pride and it's about your rep, like they're absolutely plagued with issues of violence, with issues of crime and issues that, just perpetuate problems for themselves. Like, it seems like a terrible idea to like, say that that's good or say that that's something that's beneficial when it's like, actually, no, we need to move away from these mechanisms because of the harm that they cause to ourselves and others.
Yeah, I mean, somebody I think yesterday brought up like Destiny in the DDoS scenario where he started threatening the kid's life, and I think even today he's defended that, saying like, if this is how I put food on the table and you're threatening my job, then yeah, I think it makes sense for me to threaten your life at that point. And I think we have to take into consideration that like that DDoS for these guys is like somebody ruining their reputation, somebody outing them for something, and I think in that case, yeah, they're like, okay, well, this is like actually threatening my ability to put food on the table in my livelihood.
I'm not sure if Destiny does. I think Destiny recognizes that he was having like something of a psychotic break when he did that, and I don't know if he stands by that. I think he recognizes that was an unreasonable response to.
Maybe the last time I heard him talk about it, he was still on board with it, but that might be the case now. I'm not sure.
I think, in fact, I mean, obviously, we need to check with Destiny. I'm pretty sure that like he considered it and he somewhat planned it. He talked about mapping streets out. Not really sure what that means exactly, like what looking on Google Maps. And I think he got a license to get a weapon, but then he came to his senses and realized I can't fucking kill someone over this. I need to find another way, and used his brain to come up with another solution, which is kind of like what I'm getting at as well, right? Like, obviously, if you were in a physical thing and you thought I really want to fucking smack this guy out, that's reasonable. You can think about something, right? Of course, you're an emotional being. But I'm saying that, our higher brain function should allow us to take a step back from the primal savage response to go, okay, well, what's the other ways that I can deal with this issue that I've got, you know, and use the mechanisms of society to stop this issue from happening.
Yeah, of course. This comes down to like a cost-benefit analysis where you're saying this person in these scenarios that we're talking about gets to walk away. Nothing really bad happens to them. There's no consequence, but the consequences overall are lesser because there was no physical altercation. And I'm saying the physical altercation isn't necessarily a bad consequence. I think it's a good consequence because there is some sort of consequence in the end. And yeah, that's kind of where we're having a difference, is I feel like that person needs to, like, if they're doing something messed up like that, there should be some sort of consequence for them. And you're saying it's better if that is not a consequence at all. Like violence yeah, that you would rather that not be a consequence.
The other problem I've got, I think, as well, is like, it depends, because if you're, say, DDoSing someone who's reliant on their internet connection to make money, that's very different and a more direct kind of impact or thing that's happening versus thinking that your rep is going to be negatively affected because it turns out that you got sucked off by a trans person. That's much more of an abstract concern that isn't as direct. Right? Like, I think that's not going to have as like destructive an impact on your ability to earn money as someone targeting directly the thing that you actually need to earn money.
Maybe. Like, I think that the trans person probably was like directly targeting him and trying to harm him in his career. And I think that I don't know if it's as in.
Do you think the trans person was trying to harm him, or do you think she was like a bit pissed off that he'd willingly received a blowjob from her and that, like, you know, he was kind of not willing to kind of admit to that because it looked bad?
I would assume both, because if otherwise she would like have that conversation with him and not out in public, right? I think
maybe she has. I don't know how it's gone down, but
yeah, I don't either. But I think eventually her going public with it was.
Do you think he should be able to punch a trans woman then?
I don't think so. No.
But why? She's saying stuff directly to harm his career.
Damn. This is, okay. So there's a thing that Jordan Peterson talks about.
Okay, listen, I think that says enough, doesn't it? You're saying there's this thing that Jordan Peterson talks about. I think that says enough, doesn't it?
I was gonna say
you're in a corner, brother. Listen,
I am in a corner, but the issue here isn't the level of violence that I'm talking about. The issue is somebody being trans and being a woman, like, because I do believe that there's a different level of like how we hold women accountable and how we would deal with them.
Oh my god!
Versus how we would deal with a man. Is this really what
you're going with? You're going with, oh, men and women are different, so we should just treat them differently. Oh my god!
I'm saying that, like, I do think the level that you escalated to. So say like we're talking about like.
So if a woman comes up to you in the street and calls your wife a fat bitch, can you punch her out?
I would say,
if she harasses you over it, can you punch her out?
I would say probably not. No.
Oh!
I think that.
What are you doing? Why are you throwing this hard? What the fuck?
You call it throwing. I think that's. I think that though. So I was about to give an example. So say we've got like a 5'5" dude and we have like a 7-foot dude. I would still expect the 7-foot dude to act very differently towards the 5'5" dude, because there's like a big difference in like the level of physicality that you can go to with this person. Yeah.
Okay, but if a woman, what if a 6-foot woman, muscular woman, came up and called your wife a fat bitch? Would that be okay to smack them out?
I think that there is a point. Yeah, I would say that there is a point with women as well where you can get physical with them. And I think that if they're getting mouthy as well, but again, I think most of the time just like walking towards them and like just the threat of it.
I think the problem here is you've just shown a massive inconsistency that is based on like very subjective analyses in terms of like
subjective.
Well, it is absolutely subjective, because you then have to figure out, is the person of a sufficient physicality, which is a subjective analysis, to determine whether or not I should actually punch them for insulting my wife.
Well, yeah, level of violence is a subjective analysis as well, and we're always going to talk about level of escalation.
No, but my point is your response to something is not dictated by any sort of like firm, like whether something is good, right or wrong or something like that. It is the person demonstrating a physical enough threat, in my opinion, to justify physical violence against them if they insult my wife?
Well, no, it's not whether or not they have a physical. Well, so yeah, it's about.
But it is, because you said the short guy isn't as big a problem as the big guy.
It's not as whether or not he's as big of a problem. It's my level of violence used against him can harm him more. It's about it's like, Israel versus Palestine. Like, it's like, meeting the level of escalation here also with the level of like what it is that you're fighting against. Like, we're talking about if I go and just punch somebody who's incapable of defending themselves, and I'm more likely, if I punch one woman with the same force that I punch my friend with, it's more likely to kill her versus like him. It's just gonna it's gonna knock him out, right? We're talking about different levels of consequences at the end.
But how can you possibly know that? You're literally looking at someone and judging how well they're going to be able to take a punch. You can't know that for sure. There's the concept of a glass jaw. You might punch someone and they look really strong, but they've got a glass jaw, or you hit them in the temple and knock them out. They fall and hit their head. You just can't tell that by looking at someone. You're never going to know that.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think smaller people are the last ones who should be talking crap. But yeah.
So that's what we're at. Is if you're small, don't talk crap.
Mm-hmm. The smaller you are, the less you should talk crap. The bigger you are, the more capable you are of talking crap.
Okay.
You disagree?
I mean, you've just... I don't know if you've realized how fucking insane and untenable your position is.
I'm not understanding where you think it's insane. Everything that you've brought up, I think these are like how most people would look at it. I think this is how we analyze most things as well.
You need to stop that shit with this is how most people would look at it, okay?
I'm saying this is how we would analyze these things as well. We would analyze levels of violence based on escalation, based on like the person who's using the force versus the person who's going to receive the force. We always analyze these things this way when it comes to morality as well. Like, the bigger person has more responsibility in how they treat the smaller person, for sure.
Okay, obviously gun is a force equalizer though. How do guns factor into all this?
What do you mean?
Well, obviously, like say in America, the existence of guns act as a force equalizer. So these concerns that you're demonstrating, a gun is a force equalizer. So if someone is bigger than you, you still have got the ability to put a stop to them through more aggressive, violent means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, obviously you're talking about engaging in physical violence in America, say, right? Where guns exist. So let's say that you use this mentality, right? Like, how does that factor in? Does that not create more risks and more problems because people could like pull a gun in these situations?
I'm not understanding. Like, most of the fights that I've been in have been against people who were pointing guns at me. So I'm not understanding like what the scenario is right now.
Wait, what? What do you mean?
How I've been in 3 separate fights where I got into a fight because they were pointing a gun at me. I'm not. So, are you saying like they could pull a gun and end the fight, and then they'd be able to talk more crap? Is that like is that the scenario, or what? What are we talking about?
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, I mean, that's an interesting thing which we should explore. But I'm saying if your mentality on this issue is essentially an escalation of force, what happens when the other person is able to escalate the force further and cause you harm? That's the point I'm trying to get to. But like, how does that play out then? Someone's pulls a gun on you and you get in a fight with them. What's that about? What happens there?
I mean, normally, I guess you're not. I don't know which one to respond to. I personally wasn't willing to just like let them kill me, and so I got in a fight with them instead and took the gun. But
wait, hang on though. Bear in mind that's also self-defense, right?
Yeah.
If someone's pulling a gun on you, you're engaging in, so even if it was dangerous.
That's what I said. I got in the fights because somebody was pointing a gun at me. Yeah.
But okay, I guess that's very different to, I'm just saying what I'm pointing out, because you're talking about doing this analysis of someone's ability to engage in violence against you should dictate whether or not you engage in physical violence with them, or whether or not they should shit talk you and stuff like that, right? and I'm just pointing out the existence of guns makes this more difficult to calculate because people could potentially be armed, which
Yeah, I
could
agree.
create further issues. But then what you've said is, well, most of the fights I've been in have involved guns. But then when I'm talking to you about it, it seems that what actually happened was someone pulled a gun on you, perhaps unwarranted, and you've engaged in self-defense. That's very different to like what
Yeah, I
I'm
wasn't
getting at,
when I
right?
said that I said I wasn't understanding what scenario we're even talking about. So you're saying that like a level of gun could or somebody pulling out a gun could change like the level of violence in that scenario. And yeah, of course I agree with that.
Well, I'm just okay. The base point that I'm getting at is you were talking about the need to do a calculation of someone's ability to engage in physical force, or someone's physical characteristics should dictate their ability with which they can shit talk or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm saying that there's other things that exist in society, guns or knives if guns are illegal, that make this calculation much more difficult.
Yeah,
So I
but
just
then
I
we're
just think this is
talking
a
about a
stupid way
cost
to.
benefit analysis again. That's different than like level of force versus somebody who's smaller, right? Like there's a reason why we say men shouldn't hit women, and it's for the reason that I'm talking about because they're like the guy being much bigger
Okay, well, we
is.
might say that, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that's true. I don't think that men shouldn't hit women. It depends on the circumstances.
I agree it depends on the circumstances, but so like there's videos on like Twitter right now going around of like, a girl punching a kid over and over at school and the boy eventually just punches her in the face and knocks her out. Like I think that was like that's justified. She's following you around hitting you over and over. But I've had girlfriends hit me over and over who are much smaller than me and instead I'm just going to like hold them down and get them to chill out instead of punching them in the face, right? Like I think that the level of violence there is going to be very different versus a guy.
Okay, but don't you think that your ability to engage in violence against a woman could perhaps act as a disincentive if they might engage in violence against you?
I think that probably me holding them down, it probably hurts normally. It's not easy to get somebody into a
But you were
hold where you
but
hold
you were
them
saying
down.
earlier in society, it's good that we have the threat of violence against others because it acts as a disincentive for them to act badly. Surely your ability to engage in violence against a woman should act as a disincentive for them to be violent towards you then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the process of
That's not
holding
what
them
you're
down,
saying.
like it is what I'm saying. I just said that you are hurting them in the
But then
process
you
of
think it'd
holding
be
them
wrong to
down.
sock them. You think it'd be wrong to sock them in the jaw.
Yeah.
Why? Why? That acts as a disincentive, and that's good, isn't it? I thought that's what you were saying earlier.
It does, but I think the level of violence versus the person that you're talking about is going to. I think that plays in. I think that always plays in. It plays in how we analyze all violence. Like
Well, so
war, like when we're talking about war, like that's why I brought up like Israel Palestine. Like people are one of the biggest things that they bring up all the time is that Israel's just bigger and more capable, and the fact that they act in the way that they do is just bullying the other guys because they're not even capable of returning fire in the same manner. And yeah,
I just think that like analysis of geopolitics between two states is on such a big macro level that I think that that's a very different conversation when we're discussing interpersonal interactions of violence between one another. Like the scale of Israel Palestine and the issues involved, the factors involved, the nuances are so
it is,
vast and
but right now
complicated
I'm just
that
talking about escalation of violence. I'm talking about the way that you escalate when you take into consideration who it is that you're escalating against. Like, yeah, I think that most people, sorry, I don't want to keep saying that, but I think like I feel like smaller people, we would judge a bigger person for hurting a smaller person much more harshly than two people of equal size hurting one another. I think
that's
the
bad
level of
because we need to
culpability is much worse.
contextualize what the exact thing that has happened is, right? Because if a smaller person pulls a gun on someone, I think the bigger person is entitled to engage in severe violence against them to stop them. And
Mhm.
the end result might be like, look, this massive, muscly person beat the shit out of this tiny 5-foot woman. Isn't that terrible? And it's like, well, she pulled a gun on him though, and he
Yeah.
defended himself, which resulted in like her getting severely harmed. But then she's the clear aggressor in that situation. It's a self-defense situation,
Yeah.
you know?
So when we talk about how they escalate and whether or not it was necessary to escalate, yeah, that's going to be very different. But when we talk about the level of culpability and who's like, yeah, whether and how responsible you are for the way that you treat the other person, I think we're always going to put it on the person with more power in that scenario. So if it's the person with the gun, that's going to be the person with the gun. If it's the bigger person, it's going to be the bigger person.
But then if we go back to what we're talking about originally, which is this, you know, whether or not you're justified in using physical violence for someone, say, insulting your wife or harassing you, you're only going to engage in physical violence against a person doing that if your assessment is that they are weaker than you. Or sorry, stronger than you. I mean, stronger than you. If someone's stronger than you in your mind and they insult your wife and give your wife shit, you are going to engage with violence. If they're smaller or shorter than you, then you're not going to do that, or you're going to be less likely to do that.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, well, what is it then? Explain
it. I said that that you're still engaging in violence with that person. It's the level of violence. Like holding somebody down in pinning them is still violence. You are still like physically controlling this person. It is still violence. But I'm talking about, yes, the level of violence there changes.
Okay, right.
Based on the
Let's make this really clear. Let's make this really clear, okay? So we've got two situations. One situation, you're walking down the street with your girlfriend. A guy comes up to you. He's like 6 foot, built like a brick shit house, okay? Really fucking muscly, really big, and harasses you and says your wife's a fat bitch and like gives you shit over that consistently. What do you take in that instance versus if a 5 foot woman, tiny, skinny little thing, comes up to you and engages in exactly the same behavior?
So the 6 foot dude, yeah, I'm just gonna like treat him like I would. Like I would expect people to treat me. Like, yeah, I would think that we would just, hopefully he runs away if I'm coming towards him. If he doesn't, then yeah, we'll probably get into some sort of physical altercation. Same with the woman. If I'm walking towards her, I would expect her to walk away. If she doesn't, we'll get into some physical altercation. But the physical altercation now with the guy is we're probably going to end up fighting each other, and the level of force is going to be equal because we're about the same size. Whereas with the woman, the level of violence there is going to be very different. I'm likely going to pick her up and move her, or like, you know, put her somewhere else. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think that I'm probably maybe cover her mouth for a while. I don't know. Like, I think that, yeah, I'm gonna treat her like a little kid versus a grown man. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
I would
be consistent in. Sorry, I want
to repeat this. I am not like advocating for people to be violent, and I think that these are like very rare scenarios.
But you're saying it's good. No! Don't fucking. You're saying it's good. You're saying it's a good thing.
I am getting to that. I am saying, but yes, I am saying that eventually there are scenarios, and I think that just by these scenarios existing, it actually makes them less likely to happen. I think that this is what makes it less likely to happen, and I think I'm glad that we have other mechanisms, but these interpersonal consequences are what makes it less likely to happen.
Okay. I mean,
I think smaller people end up even more less likely to do these things. Yes.
I just think for me, a better way to deal with these situations is to speak to the person and ask them to leave. If that doesn't work, contacting the police, regardless of the size, regardless of what they look like, regardless of who they are, and say, hey, this person is, you know, harassing me and giving me shit, and I don't like it. And the police come along and they, you know, shoo them away. And that hopefully resolves the situation. If someone persistently is doing this to you, there are mechanisms like restraining orders that you can get that will stop the person from doing that. And that seems to be the best way to deal with this, rather than trying to do a calculation of me as a citizen, right, what level of physical force should I utilize against this person that's insulting my wife, you know, from an untrained perspective, and then engaging in that just seems like a terrible idea. In the moment, it's extremely dangerous, particularly if you're trying to fight with someone that's physically stronger than you. And further to that, if you live your life like that, you're going to have long-term negative consequences that could be as serious as serious physical injury or perhaps jail time.
Okay. Yeah, it's when you go on to if you live your life like that, that's normally where we're having like this big disconnect, is like, it's normally, I'm just talking about like a scenario.
Do you disagree that is like a good way to manage these situations and the most optimum way to try and move forward and not get in issues?
Yes,
Do you
I think
disagree?
that the most optimum way is normally to avoid these things. Yes, but I also think that there are scenarios where these things become necessary and that it's good that they exist in some manner. Yeah. I think that they're only likely to happen less if these other mechanisms exist in some manner. Yeah.
Okay, but these mechanisms are like, I mean, it's like the court of public opinion. They're like, you know, there's no kind of like oversight over your own ability to assess these things, and there's much more chance and potential for you as an individual in an untrained perspective to make a mistake that could lead to terrible outcomes.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that's how morality works in general. Is like it's court of public opinion and stigma and social norms and all of that stuff. Yeah, and I don't think that the analysis between the two people is actually like you're adding and subtracting all of these different things. Like I think it's pretty simple. I think most people can pretty easily just look at somebody and understand like what level of violence would be overboard or what's killing it. What is it? Beating a dead horse. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I mean, yeah, I don't, I just think that I personally, particularly if like you're concerned with these communities and stuff, I don't think that advocating as this being good or a positive or something to engage in is right. And I think I would imagine that advocacy groups that look at these kinds of violence from these communities oppose this and are against it and would want to work to a position where people aren't engaging in these sort of like self-destructive behaviors.
I agree, but I feel like over and over. So I'm saying, hey, there's these like edge cases where this is like a rare thing that happens, and the fact that it rarely happens is enough for it to almost never happen. Like that's good enough. Like just the very few times that it happens is good enough to make it almost never happen. And the fact that we don't want it to happen and that we have other mechanisms in place is like these are all good things that make it to where this is like these are extreme edge cases where you have to be really out of pocket for this to be the case. But then
But you're saying these are edge cases, and you're saying that normies do this, and this is what normal most people do. How can it be
yes,
edge cases, but this is what most normal people do or would
most
say is okay?
the interactions are edge cases in the first place. Yes, this is what most people would do in these interactions. But then you're taking that and acting like, oh, this is so normal, and I'm actually like, we don't want violence all over the place, and blah blah blah. It's not going to be all over the place because these are already very rare things that happen. We're talking about like very small edge cases. I don't know how many times you've been standing there and somebody else is like actively like verbally assaulting the other person. It's rare things. These are things that almost never happen, and I believe they almost never happen because of the threat of violence in the first place, because of that likelihood that it's going to happen. These are rare edge cases that almost never happen, but then you're generalizing this like I'm saying, like, yeah, you should just be getting into fights, and then you're going to have problems in your life because you're getting into fights all the time, and this is your way of life. And I'm saying it's not a way of life. We are talking about like rare edge cases where this is very unlikely in the first place.
I mean, I would say though that that's one element of that is not necessarily because of the threat of violence. I think it's because people often have got a tendency to de-escalate situations, particularly interpersonal ones, because they're aware and familiar with the negative consequences that can come from like engaging in this kind of like wanton violence or like responsive violence to situations. And it's often a tendency to de-escalate and move things away from more physical altercations, or
and I think for most cases, those are going to be more than enough. Yeah.
Okay. Red Penny in chat asks a question here. Have you ever lost a fight?
Yeah, I got head butted in the nose one time, and once he broke my nose, I couldn't see anything. That was kind of it.
Yeah.
There was blood everywhere.
No, sure. I mean, yeah, it feels like we've moved a bit. It seems like the original take was kind of like, violence works in a way to like stop just disrespect generally against you. But now we're saying that, right.
I'm saying the
these
rare
edge
chance
cases,
that it happens,
right.
These edge cases just give you that.
I mean, people
level
talk
of
shit
threat.
to each other all the time, right? Like,
yes, but again, we're talking about cases where that's not like an okay thing, like where it's not an acceptable thing, where this is an area where it's not okay, and now it's a bad scenario. And now, yeah, I would say like there's there were like, I had a pizza guy who went to somebody's house and they started like making fun of him for being poor and saying, we're not going to tip you. And they threw the money at him and started calling him a bitch. And I don't remember what he did, but I think he like popped their tire or something like that. I think most people would be like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, if you're going to talk to people like that, you should probably get your tire popped. He's still got fired, like, obviously, like, but yeah, I think most people are like, yeah, getting your freaking tire.
Wait.
Tire, why do I keep saying tire?
That's different, but that's different to the pizza guy chucking the pizza on the floor and going and fucking clocking him around the face.
Yeah, of course. But I'm saying we're talking about things. I'm saying if you're talking,
it's like Schadenfreude. But okay, there's Schadenfreude, right?
Case, hold on, okay. But you just brought this up and now you're not understanding the example. You are saying that, like, people talk crap all the time. People are always talking crap to each other. And I'm saying there are scenarios where this is acceptable and it's like, you know, it's different because based on the context. And then there's scenarios where it's not acceptable and you're just being disrespectful and it would be good for there to be some sort of consequence there. Yeah.
But there's this, you know, there's the idea that, like, sometimes you think it's funny or you think, oh, well, that person deserved for that to happen to them. Like Schadenfreude, right? Like, someone's a terrible person, they get the tire pot for talking some shit, and people are like, oh yeah, well, fucking, he deserved that or whatever, right? But I think if we were to analyze it, you know, on a more foundational level, the fact that someone is like talking shit to a pizza guy, yeah, that's a shitty thing to do, but causing destruction to their property that would result in, like, you know, high expenditure to repair that, I think we would probably say, if we're looking at purely from a logical basis, that that's probably like not really a fair response. I mean, you know,
what is a fair response to this?
What, to someone talking shit to you for being poor and not tipping them?
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know, thinking that guy's an asshole and, I don't know, going about your business.
Okay.
Like, what right does someone have to determine, right, well, they've wronged me, so I am going to essentially engage in a sense of vigilante justice, and I'm going to exact a punishment on them that I have determined is appropriate. This actually acts in complete opposition to our legal justice system, because we're saying that the victims of something should determine what the punishment for the person is.
No, I'm not. I'm saying no, because we're talking about victims of crime versus people just being dickheads. And I'm saying that, like, yes, if there's crimes, if there's something bad happening, like, yes, you should be calling the police. Like, that's a completely different scenario. Whereas I'm saying interpersonal immoral scenarios where
I'm not talking. Okay, one principle of our legal system, okay, is that we shouldn't let the victim of something, in this case a crime, a victim of something determine what the punishment for the perpetrator is, because they are going to be biased. So I'm not saying that this has anything to do with the law. I'm saying that the fundamental principle that the victim of something is going to be unable to determine what the correct punishment is because they are too emotionally invested in it is a good principle. So in these interactions, when someone is wronged by someone, right, I think engaging in a determination of what the punishment for that should be is wrong, because they're too emotionally invested and close to it to determine, you know, what that punishment should be. And I think a more reasonable response to that would be for the pizza guy to go, hey, these guys were like total jerks when they ordered a pizza and they didn't tip me. Like, and maybe there's something they can do about that. I don't know. Blacklist the address, who knows? But I think that there's other remedies that they can take through more like official routes beyond just thinking, well, this guy insulted me for being more, I'm going to pop his tire and cause, like, you know, a few $100s worth of repairs for him.
Yeah, and there are states that say that if somebody's pointing a gun at you, it's your responsibility to run away and go call the police. And I think that at some point we do put like levels of like culpability on the interpersonal people interacting, and we say there's already rules here on how you should interact with one another.
If someone is pointing a gun at you, you should run away and call the police. Yes, I'm fairly certain
so we have stand your ground laws where you're allowed to stand your ground, and if other people are threatening your space, then now you're allowed to interact with them and meet their level of violence. And then there's also, like, you know, states where they say, like, no, you have to run away and you have to go, you have to show that you, and this is what a lot of people thought happened with Rittenhouse. This is why so many people were so confused about Rittenhouse, because he wasn't in a stand your ground state, but also somebody was actually already physically assaulting him. Whereas, like, they're saying if there is a level of threat against you, like somebody pointing a gun at you, it is on you to have tried to get away first and have tried to run and find police first before engaging in in violence. And if you can't get away and they're not letting you get away, only then you can engage in violence. And I'm saying, yeah, most of the time, like, we look at these scenarios and say, no, like, we already have rules around how you interact with these people interpersonally. And in these other cases, yes,
in any
saying
case,
there's
listen,
rules.
I feel like
we're
moving on to this legal thing and stand your ground and stuff like that. That we're moving quite far away from what the original point of this is. Like, I've got disagreements. Obviously, I'm not saying the law is perfect. I'm not saying that I agree with everything the law says. I'm just saying that I agree with a fundamental principle that a victim of something is unable to truly determine what the punishment should be. Because the thing is like, we're not talking about a self-defense situation. We're talking about a guy getting insulted by someone and them giving them some shit and them determining of their own accord, well, they deserve to have their tires popped for talking shit to me, and then going and popping their tires. Right? This is very different to like someone pointing a gun at you and us having a discussion as to whether or not that person is justified in using force to defend themselves, which, by the way, I think that they are. We're talking about someone insulting you with words and you're justifying the pizza guy popping their tire, causing damage and possibly interfering with their life. That seems like an excessive response to hurt feelings.
Bringing up a legal principle. 2, I'm arguing against the principle.
I'm bringing up a legal principle because I agree with it. So you think that the victim of something has got the ability to determine what the punishment of the perpetrator should be?
I'm saying that there are scenarios where we're saying, yes, there are interpersonal rules that we set up ahead of time to already say this is how you should interact in these scenarios.
Where's the rule that says you can pop someone's tire if they insult you? Where's that written down?
I think there's levels of escalation. I think that there's like, we think that there are some thid that are justified versus others.
Where does it say that then? Where does it say that you can pop someone's tire if they personally insult you as a pizza delivery person? Where's that? Where'd you get that from?
What do you mean? Where did I get it from? What say?
Well, you're saying there's like these rules in place about the way we interact with each other, and you're saying that to justify a pizza guy popping someone's tire because they insulted them.
Yeah, I'm saying that, there's levels of escalation that it's like a case-by-case analysis. I don't know why you're saying, where does it say you can pop a tire? Like, we're talking about like levels of escalation.
But you're using it to justify this. So you think the pizza guy was justified to pop someone's tire because they insulted them?
I don't know if popping the tire was actually like I don't know. I would have to think more about it, but I think that, like, in some cases,
what is there to think about? What is there to think about? What do you mean? And why should the person that's the victim of it decide what the consequence is? That doesn't make any sense.
I disagree with that. I think that, like, you and I, like, if we're talking about interpersonal interactions, we're talking about, like, not legal things. We're talking about interpersonal interactions. So when you say why are they able to decide for themselves? Are you saying we should take this back to like a legal scenario where we're talking about legal things, or are we talking about interpersonal things?
You're missing the point. You're being super disingenuous. I'm not talking about having the legal system come in to determine that, right? What I'm saying to you is we've got a principle that the victim of something is unable, because they're too emotionally invested in what's happened, to accurately determine a fitting punishment for something that's happened to them. That's a principle that we've adopted in our legal system, right? And to give you an example of why it's good in the legal system, there are other circumstances in other countries. Like there's one case where a woman got blinded by acid, and the legal system over there is the victim can determine what the punishment is. And I think they determined that they should have their eye fucking blinded with acid. And the victim went and fucking blinded the person with acid. It was like an actual state mandated response. And that's the kind of consequence you get when you don't have this principle that the victim should not have any place in determining what the outcome is. And I think if you look at it more broadly, I think there's a lot of truth to this principle, which is a victim just simply is too emotionally invested. And because they have been wronged, right, if they determine a punishment, they're likely to consider or think of a more extreme or excessive punishment than is actually fair, because they're the ones that are invested and they're the ones that are emotionally invested in it. So I'm saying that pizza delivery person was wronged in some way. They were insulted, but because they felt very personal about it, right, the response and the punishment they determined necessary for that was excessive, which is popping someone's tire, which is going to cause hundreds of dollars worth of damage that would need to be repaired, and potentially cause potentially extreme negative consequences if they need to use their car in an emergency or something, and they're not able to because they don't realize their tire's been popped.
Okay,
but you're saying that you don't know whether that's okay or not.
The reason I brought up the stuff earlier is because I'm not understanding where you're drawing these lines or why you're bringing them into interpersonal scenarios. Yes, that is a principle for legal scenarios. So if you lie about me, I don't want to be your friend anymore, and I want to go tell everybody that you're a liar. I shouldn't be able to decide this because we have rules that I should not be able to decide how I handle these scenarios in an interpersonal scenario.
No, you're being so fucking weaselly.
I'm not. You're mixing up legal scenarios with interpersonal scenarios.
Absolutely are being weaselly and dishonest because you are using a totally different example.
I'm asking you to separate.
Pivoting away from the point that I'm making. Because
I'm not. I'm asking you a question. I want you to answer the question. I am asking you to separate an interpersonal scenario in what we're talking. The example that I just gave you with a legal scenario where somebody's pointing a gun.
Let me just ask you this. Let me ask. No. Let me ask you this, right? So, do you think there's a difference between a pizza delivery person getting insulted and then them going and destroying someone's property, popping someone's tire? Okay? Do you think there's a difference between that and, on the other hand, if the pizza delivery person was insulted and that pizza delivery person went round to their friends and said, that person, they insulted me and they're a liar and they're a piece of shit? Do you think there's a difference between those two things?
I'm asking you to separate it because your examples don't separate it. I'm asking you to do that. You can't ask me to answer your question for you. You're the one giving the example. You have to answer that question. How do you separate that? Because you're the one.
How do you separate it?
You're the one pointing at that for interpersonal scenarios, Chud. You're the one doing that.
Because
you have to separate it, bro.
Because you're fucking retarded, man.
I'm the one who's saying it's different.
There's a difference between physically destroying someone's property, versus going round and calling someone a dickhead because they insulted you.
Oh,
the difference is, on the one hand, you're destroying someone.
There's a difference. Okay, go ahead.
I can lay it out more for you if that isn't clear enough, mate.
I'm saying that your principle.
Do you really need me to lay this out more for you? Do you really need me to explain why this is different more?
I'm saying
I can do it if you want. I can do it if you want.
I don't think you're understanding. The way that you're acting says you're not understanding how far off you are. You are taking a legal principle and you are applying it to a interpersonal scenario. And I'm saying, why would you do this? Why would you take a legal principle and apply it here?
You're a fucking idiot and you're being so dishonest right now. I'm doing it because I'm saying we've adopted it in the legal system because it's a very strong principle that makes sense when you think about it, okay? But you're saying in interpersonal situations, right? I'm saying, well, we should adopt this principle in this interpersonal analysis here, okay? Because you are suggesting that someone ought to put across, substantive consequence on someone, an actual consequence that could affect them to like a really fundamental level, right? And you're trying to justify that. And I'm saying,
who do they go to? Who do they go to give them
what, for getting insulted?
Yeah, who do they go to?
Well, they speak to their boss and they say, listen, that guy whose house I went around to insulted me. If we get a delivery, I don't want to have to go around there again. And they'll go, yep, no problem. You don't have to go around there again. And that's it. Problem solved.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I'm asking you for. I'm not understanding why this is so hard.
But then you're okay. But you're trying to fucking justify the fella just popping their tires.
I'm saying that it's good that there are consequences. I'm saying that you overly heating somebody up and getting them all pissed off to where they're likely to do something crazy, and then standing back afterwards is what we call what is it, like a what do we call it again? I don't even remember. Bully victim or something like that. But where you bully somebody and then you act like you're the one being bullied afterwards and you act like you're a victim. I don't think it's right that people troll people and get them all emotional, get them all worked up to where they're likely to do this thing. I think that you have to take some level of practicality into these scenarios and say, okay, if you are trolling people this hard and like getting it under their nerves this much, you have to take into consideration that yes, I am pushing them to points where they are likely to do something crazy. And when they do something crazy, it's kind of my fault in some sort of practical sense. Yes, I think that I think it's on you for doing something stupid. And I think that there should be some sense of consequences for that in the end. Yeah. But I'm not advocating for people to like act emotionally or anything like that. Yeah.
I might look at a situation and I might think, oh, wow, what did that person expect? What a fucking idiot. Right? But that doesn't make it okay or make it good or mean that I'm like, Well, I think this is a good mechanism for society,
I
right?
agree with that, but I'm saying that there's still something wrong on the other person's side. I'm saying that there should be like consequences for these. Like there should be things that actually like meet their level of aggression.
But what's wrong with the consequence of like just insulting them back or talking shit to them back? Or if there isn't like a mechanism to like the police and everything, what about if he just said, yeah, well, your wife's fucking ugly? You know, he says, oh, you're poor. And you could be like, well, at least I haven't got a fucking ugly wife. Fuck you, motherfucker. And then you just leave. Like, should that not be the fucking backwards and forwards? Or, but I mean, maybe in that case, the guy would then be justified to punch the pizza delivery guy because he's insulted his wife. I don't know. I think the response to words should just be more words and more insults and more shit talking. Like, that to me would be, you know, another, if you didn't want to kind of deal with it through a more official, just talk shit back. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I personally...
Or just leave, or just walk away.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm talking about, though. That is what I'm afraid of. That is what I don't like about this, is that, like, somebody else comes and does something wrong to you, and now you're like, you know what? I should have to bear the cost of them being a dick, and now I should have to leave and walk away from what I'm doing. What cost is there to someone insulting
you? What cost is there?
Hold on. I'm saying the cost is you having to leave. I'm saying the cost is you having to walk away. That is like, you're the one saying, now they're being a dick, so now I have to bear the cost and I have to leave and walk away because this person's being immoral. This person's doing something wrong.
Yeah, there's a concept called being a bigger man. That's like, you know, a concept that we constantly look at and talk about.
Those are good things.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of being a bigger man, is if someone's being a dick to you, yeah, you might have to walk away from the situation, but you shouldn't. But the whole point of saying be a bigger man is so we don't promote this idea that you have to needlessly escalate to further levels of violence in order to be a man. Be a bigger man is kind of like an opposition to the idea that we should, you know, escalate and stuff. It's the idea that, hey, yeah, do you know what? This isn't worth it. You know, if you don't want to insult someone back, even, you can be like, you're being a dickhead, I'm fucking out of it, right?
I agree with that.
Like,
I agree that is a good thing.
But you do, though, because you're saying it's good, but but you're saying it's good to have the violence there, you know, to like disincentivize that in the first place. So do you actually agree with that then? Because it sounds like you don't.
Yeah, so I think that that's a good thing, but I also, one, pragmatically, I understand why people would engage in violence. Two, I think that it's also good that at some level there are consequences for these things that disincentivize them. I think that if there wasn't, everybody would be running around acting like this towards everybody that they don't know all the time because there's no reason not to, and it's fun, and you can make a bunch of, you know, crazy viral videos out of it, and, you know, it's like, yeah, I think otherwise this would be happening all the time and people would be getting under each other's skin all the time. And we would just say, oh yeah, well, you just have to deal with it and suck it up and walk away. And I don't think that should always be the expectation. I think that there are times where those people who are the ones doing something wrong, they should be the ones bearing the consequences, not the person who's the victim.
Okay, but you understand there's the difference in the levels of consequence, if you want to call it that, are very different. Of you having to walk away from a situation versus them having physical violence put upon them for talking shit to you. The consequences there are a lot more severe than you having to walk away. Okay.
Yeah, but in general, I think escalation is like necessary for things to stop happening. Like, somebody, like, you know, shoves me. If I just shove them back, that doesn't actually like do anything. Like, yeah, normally you get to escalations hoping that the other person's going to stop.
But you notice in that example, you're talking about physical violence, someone pushing his battery. Like that's like a form of violence against you.
Right. I'm giving an example of where, yeah, we don't.
Right, but we're in the arena of talk.
Meet that. We're saying, yeah, you need to escalate at some point.
Sure. I mean, the thing is, in that situation, I think violence and self-defense is fine. If someone like were to push you or to like touch you in a way that you don't like, I even think then, as long as they're not being a continuous threat against your person, right? A de-escalation may even be appropriate there. But if someone is like coming at you and physically assaulting you, yeah, in that case, you've got a right to defend yourself. But I mean, you know, we are looping a bit, but like, you know, we're talking about words, though. We're talking about words and a response to words being violence, right?
I'm appealing to the principle. Yes, I'm saying that the principle of escalation, I think that, again, like, yeah, I think that it's about, like, it's not just what the overall outcomes are, but it's also about what are the pragmatic expectations of the people in these scenarios. And I think that it's good if people walk away. Sure, that leads to a much better outcome. But I think overall societally, I think that it may eventually lead to worse outcomes, to where this is a norm, this is something that's acceptable, and there's nothing in place to de-incentivize it.
Okay.
But
I
yeah,
feel like we're just looping at this point.
we are.
Okay.
Any other questions from chat?
I mean, well, I'm interested to this take of like I mean, I don't know how much longer you've got, but obviously you've got the black rep take. What was that about?
The black rep? What was that? Oh, yeah. So I think, yeah, again, I'm talking about like pragmatically when we look at like somebody feeling like their livelihood is threatened, and they think that, like, this is threatening like all of the work that they put into a job and all of the time that they spent doing something. I think that eventually there is a scenario where, yes, people like smearing your character and ruining your life, like, I think that there's, in scenarios where you already know, like in the hood, like we already know nobody's calling the cops. That's much worse than having a bad rep as being a snitch or like calling the cops. So we already like take that out of it. This isn't a possibility, and we're capable of like handling this between ourselves. I think that that's, like pragmatically, I think that that makes sense.
Do you think it's a good thing though?
I think that it's good for us to find other ways of dealing with these things. Yeah. I think that that's better. But I also understand that like people like so there's an issue here where we talk about like level of accountability versus level of understanding of something. And I'm not saying that these people shouldn't be held accountable. I'm saying that I think you have to take these things into consideration. So like somebody has BPD, like they go off and like scream and yell and make a fool of themselves. Like I think that taking into consideration a mental illness that they have is important, while also like saying like, yeah, you can't act that way, or like, them still being held accountable. I think that these things are important to take into context.
Yeah, I guess that for me, I guess a concern of mine is like there's a lot of obviously racism that exists, right? And as we know, racism is bad. And it feels like, wait, you disagree with that? You think racism's good?
I don't think racism even exists, but go ahead.
Okay. No, all I was going to say is that like it just certainly feels sometimes like these arguments about these cultures can kind of fuel rightoid perspectives and arguments about these cultures. If you're arguing that, well, right? So
yeah, there's lefties who will say like, yeah, like, well, they shouldn't have to go to jail for stealing stuff because there's systemic racism. Like, yeah, that's stupid. That's dumb.
But in the context of this conversation, the idea that like, well, the whole kind of like rep being tied to like acts of physical violence and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think
like,
that there's
you're saying that you're saying that people need to be able to represent a violent threat of force in response to their rep being attacked, because that's another aspect to protecting their reputation. Have I got that right?
Well, that's not what I'm saying here. No, that's the conversation we were having before. What I'm saying here is there's a level of like disconnect when we have a bunch of white people who don't understand how people were brought up in their circumstances and like the rules in a culture, where they're all sitting there where they've never been in these scenarios. They have no idea what that's like. And they're all sitting there like, wagging their fingers at these people without ever actually bringing up the context. I think it's important to bring up the context and say like, yeah, you're super lucky that you've never had to be in these scenarios, and that you weren't raised in this way, and that you don't have like these completely different rules in how you interact with one another. I still think it's good to like say that it's bad, and I still think it's immoral, and I think that like they still abide by the same moral rules that the rest of us do, and the same legal rules that the rest of us do. It's no different for them, but I think the context is actually important, and I do think that it looks bad when there are people like white people, grew up in like, upper middle class suburb types people
I
looking
didn't grow
down
up in
on
a
them.
middle class suburb, but
I'm
continue.
not saying that specifically, but I'm saying that like I do think that that's likely a big part of our communities and like the people that are in our chats going off about this. And so, yeah, I think it's important for us to like bring up that context and say like, yeah, these are like parts of the scenarios. And
Okay.
when you're looking at these people, you are doing it from a position where you've never actually had to
Do
even
you
consider this.
do you feel the same way of people in America wagging their finger at Saudi Arabia for their anti-LGBT policies?
100%. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Like that was America like 15, 20. That was me 15, 20 years ago. Like I don't know, like where I mean, I guess not like throwing people off ropes and stuff like that, but yeah, there's like we were all very like
But
transphobic
why? The
not
context
too
of their
long
cult,
ago.
but why does it matter that they throw people off roofs? That's the context of their culture, isn't it? That's just what they consider to be the right way to deal with that particular issue. So who are we to say, that that's bad and wag our fingers? That's their culture. That's the homophobia seeped
Do
in
you
over
think
there.
that's what I
That's
said? Do you think I said that we can't say it's bad? Because I'm pretty sure I literally said the opposite of that. I'm pretty sure I
but
literally
you
said
seem to be saying that there's something wrong with saying it's bad. Like we're wagging
no.
our fingers.
I didn't. I said we
Well, oh,
should
hang
say
on.
it's
Wait, no, no,
bad.
no. But wait, no, no. But you're saying that by saying it's bad, we're wagging our fingers. That's considered to be like a bad act, right?
I said, no, I didn't say that. I said doing that without ever actually bringing up the context. Yes, you look disconnected. You look like a person of privilege, like, a person like
So
pointing at
if I want to criticize Saudi Arabian policies about homosexuality, I need to bring up the context that it's like a deeply homophobic culture. Or like, what do you mean?
yeah, I would think if there's a likelihood that
You can't
people
just
don't
call it bad.
understand
You
that.
can't just say I think that's fucking dumb and stupid and retarded. You can't.
But is it
You've got to.
objectively bad? Like, is there some objective morality you're working off of here? Or is this like based on social standards and understanding and stuff like that?
Well, no, sure. Obviously, I can't say it's objectively bad, but I find it kind of weird the idea that I need to preface the context of something to call something bad.
I think that the context of something is what makes it like so we have the social norms here and we know it's bad because we grew up here. And if we grew up there, we wouldn't think it's bad and we'd be doing the same exact things. And so that's kind of my point is like, I feel like it's weird when people
So
are
if I
overly
want to
critical.
criticize the Holocaust happening, I need to say, well, if I was a Nazi, I probably would have been loading the ovens up myself.
I mean, I think most people have already said that, and I think most people understand that. But
No, but
yeah,
sure.
I
But the
say
point is, do
that
I have to
fairly
preface every
consistently.
time I want to
No, not every
criticize
time.
something?
Not every time.
Well, then
but
why
I
do I have
think,
to? Well, then why do I have to do it in this case when I'm saying I think that this stuff I'm seeing from this culture is stupid?
because we're
Why
not
is it
talking
important that I
about
do it?
laws that I think most people are aware of. We're talking about cultural norms that I think most people are disconnected from and don't understand. Like when I talk to people about Black culture, like I feel like most people just don't get it, don't understand, and there is this huge disconnect.
Yeah, I just think if I see something, even if it's like there's a cultural context that might make it understandable from within that culture, if I think it's bad or stupid, I'm not going to waste my time prefacing it. This is what the leftoids expect from you. They expect you to preface all your statements and comments and make sure you are, really underlining the contextual, reality of something. When I think you can just look at something and go, yeah, I think that's kind of dumb. Here's why I think it's dumb, and that's that.
I mean, the way that I look at the way that the left does that is very different than what I'm saying. They'll look at it and say, therefore you're a racist, or
Well, no,
therefore
the
like
left do exactly this with Black culture. 100% they do this sort of
yes,
thing.
I'm saying that they're doing this, but they say that therefore you're a racist or therefore you're doing something wrong or immoral. I'm saying it is like I think that there's a level of charitability that we should expect from people, and I think that is like so uncharitable and ridiculous. I don't think what I'm saying here is uncharitable or ridiculous. I think that what I'm saying is that there's an understanding that comes with context. So like understanding why somebody would commit a crime, I think a lot of times is important, even though we still want the same punishment. We still want like the same legal outcomes. I think understanding the circumstances that they were in to do that thing is important as well. So if I just come over and I start telling you about all the crimes I've ever committed, you're probably going to want to know why, because you're looking at me as a person and you would think, why the hell would you do that? I have a list of 19 felonies. Like if I just start listing all this stuff off to people, yeah, there's like one picture that they're going to get. Or if I start talking about like, yeah,
I would, I had to go to the doctor. I got 5 surgeries in a row. They left me with just a bunch of painkillers by myself. Got addicted to these at like 15. Very quickly was like moving up to harder and harder things. Like, I think there's a lot of context all of a sudden that like makes things make more sense. And everybody would think, yeah, probably if I was in that scenario, I would have ended up in your shoes as well. Like if that was the context for me, I probably would have ended up in a similar scenario. And so I think, yeah, there's a difference of adding the level of context for understandability versus saying you don't understand this, therefore you're racist, or like, something like that. Yeah, I think there's a big difference.
So basically, you're what you're saying is, from what I can understand, I'm trying to. It's not to like paint people as racist for not doing it. It's you're advocating for like more sympathy and empathy for people that are doing certain things, basically.
Yeah, and especially if it comes
Okay.
to like actually changing those cultures and wanting to criticize those people, you would have to understand the context in order to criticize people, I think, most of the time. I think in order to say you shouldn't do this thing, you should be able to understand their scenario as well.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think that like maybe if you're looking at it from some academic sense or something like that, or talking about change, I feel that's a bit much to ask for from like Destiny on his stream when a guy is saying that he's going to like fucking physically harm him, and because he's made an off-color comment about his mother. I think that you're kind of asking for like a bit much for this kind of like radical empathy and sympathy when someone is like saying they're going to hurt you, right?
I'm not, if somebody's saying they're going to hurt you, I'm not understanding what context we're putting this in. Like, I think Destiny does it normally. Like, I think he normally like adds like
Right.
context to these things. And I think
So what?
normally
Okay,
we're
well in
talking
that
about
case, then what
morals,
is your
right?
problem with Destiny's take? Then what was your issue with what he said,
With the,
or what I said even?
it was
Like,
again, it was the same thing I said at the beginning. It was the broadness of how this applies to just all words. It wasn't. Are you talking about with the
well, no,
context?
well,
Or,
okay. I mean,
I didn't have a
obviously,
problem
it
with.
seemed like your stream. I don't just want to go off the stream title. I get that's provocative to get people in the door. I do the same
Yes.
thing, right? And I didn't get a chance to actually watch what your takes were. But what were your what specifically were your issues with what? Let's
That was it.
forget
We already
Destiny.
talked about it.
Okay.
That was it.
But
It was just,
but okay. So okay. What should I have done differently then, I guess, would be the question.
So okay. So I'll say this. I grew up in an all-black neighborhood. I grew up like went to an all-black school, went to an all-black church. All my friends were black growing up. I grew up very differently. Eventually, when I got out of prison, I had to like learn how to like code switch better and like change the way I talk, change the way that I act, change the way that I dress, like all of these things. I think that there is a level, like I said before, I think there's a level of disconnect there where people who, now that I've lived in the suburbs and I've grown up here and I know what it's like here and I know all the kids here and how they've lived their entire lives, I do think that there's this huge disconnect on actually taking into consideration the context of what it is that drive people to do the things that they do. And I think a lot of times if we're just looking at it like out of context and just saying like, yeah, like that person did something wrong and just leaving it at that, that's fine. But in these cases, we're actually like going into these like moral analyses and never actually like bringing in like broader context. And I think that that's when it becomes kind of weird, is when we're going to like actually dig into like, this is why it's wrong and this is how it's bad and all of these other things without actually mentioning anything else. Yeah, I think that's where it becomes a little weird.
So
but I'm not saying you did anything wrong.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm just looking because you're criticizing me for like stuff I said on my stream, right? Or didn't say. Like, what is it that I missed? What is it I didn't say or should have made clearer in talking about?
I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying that there is this, like, I think from a black person's perspective. So the people who were in Destiny's chat were incredibly cringe, where they're like, oh, you never grew up in the hood, like stuff like that. I think that that's so stupid. They look dumb. I'm saying that you do look disconnected. That's it. Not that you did anything wrong. Not that you like, I'm saying that if you didn't want to look disconnected, like, yeah, you would bring into the context, you would bring in like other things to actually like say like, yeah, there's other stuff at play here that we're not actually taking into consideration, but not that you have to do these things or that you're wrong for not doing it or any of that. Yeah, I would just label it as like, it just seems a bit disconnected, but those people seem disconnected when they talk about suburban white people and checking their privilege and bullcrap like that as well. So, yeah. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying that like I was like criticizing you in that way.
No, that's fine. I mean, if it was just like, you know, you would prefer or you think that adding more context to understand it betters. I guess that my perspective on it is like you can certainly do that, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I just think that if someone's behavior is wrong, it doesn't matter what the context in which that behavior comes to occur. Like the behavior is still wrong, the behavior is still stupid, the behavior is still dumb, and can be called out as such. You know, without necessarily having to invoke all of this context to explain it. Like if someone rapes a child, I'm certain that there are certain contextual reasons in their life that led to that circumstance. But if I come out and say, yeah, that person's pretty fucked for raping that kiddie, you know, I wouldn't be expected to have to like bring up all this contextual reasons as to why that happened and understand it. Now, obviously, you know, other things that occur aren't as bad or severe as that. But by the same token, it's still like, well, that's stupid shit behavior. And it just feels like there's this, you know, unnecessary reason with which to bring up all this context where we can just say like, yeah, the behavior sucks or the behavior is bad. That's just the way I see it.
You're right. Again, I'm not saying that you did anything wrong. What I'm saying is that somebody who is from these communities would look at you saying that and feel like you're very disconnected from the reality of those scenarios, and that's it. That's like the end of it. I'm just making like a descriptive statement.
I guess the thing is, I just don't care. I think
Not-
that's the issue. I just
yeah.
don't care that they think I feel disconnected. I think
That's fine. Yeah, it's
I
not
think
a
that's what it's gonna
moral
come down to.
statement. It is just a descriptive statement that it's disconnected. I don't think that you would disagree that it's disconnected. I think Destiny would agree that it's disconnected. I don't think that anybody would disagree with that. But yeah, I think that obviously if some like a black person who did grow up that way, looking at a white dude saying these things and not bringing in that context, yeah, they might feel like there's like some sort of like implication on them. And I don't think that there's like, again, I don't think that that matters. Like that's something that they're going to have to deal with on their own. You're not doing anything wrong by just saying that it's wrong and leaving it at that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've been talking for a couple of hours now. I think that's enough content for the masses. I don't think there's anything else, is there?
No, I'm sick of you.
Okay. Well, thanks for the conversation, mate. I had a good time.
Appreciate it.
Hope you did as well.
Yeah, me too. Later, bud.
Okay. Catch you later, mate. Bye-bye.